All right, here we go. How not to die. Now I'm in the introduction still. I'm just going to read you a section. Medical anthropologists have identified several major areas of human disease, starting with the age of pestilence and famine, which largely ended with the Industrial Revolution, or the stage we're in now. The age of degenerative and man-made diseases. By the way, the author is Michael Greger, MD. Good stuff. The shift is reflected in the changing causes of death over the last century. In the 1900 in the United States, the top 3 killers were infectious diseases, pneumonia, tuberculosis. I did that wrong. The top 3 killers were infectious diseases. Here we go. Number 1, pneumonia. Number 2, tuberculosis. Number 3, diarrheal disease. Wow, I have diarrhea. I guess we don't worry about any of those anymore, do we? Now, the killers are largely lifestyle diseases, heart disease, cancer, and chronic lung disease. Is this simply because antibiotics have enabled us to live long enough to suffer from degenerative diseases? No. The emergence of these epidemics of chronic disease was accompanied by dramatic shifts in dietary patterns. This is best exemplified by what's been happening to disease rates among people in the developing world over the last few decades, as they've rapidly westernized their diets. SAD, Standard American Diet. That's how the West is killing everybody and killing its own people. In 1990, around the world, most years of healthy life were lost to undernutrition, such as diarrheal diseases in malnourished children. But now, the greatest disease burden is attributed to high blood pressure, a disease of overnutrition. So not undernutrition, now it's overnutrition. The pandemic of chronic disease has been ascribed in part to the near universal shift towards a diet dominated by animal-sourced and processed foods. Sorry, carnivores, this is gonna ruffle your feathers or your fur or whatever. In other words, meat, dairy, eggs, oil, soda, sugar, and refined grains. Can't argue with some of those. China is perhaps the best studied example. Therefore, a transition away from the country's traditional plant-based diet was accompanied by a sharp rise in diet-related chronic diseases such as obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. All right, so he's talking about meat-based diet along with oil, soda, sugar. So that gets where it gets really tricky, because even if you're not on a meat-based diet here in the United States, the crappy standard American diet includes a whole lot of sugar and refined grains. Why do we suspect these changes in diet and disease are related? Question mark. After all, rapidly industrializing societies undergo multitudes of changes. How are scientists able to parse out the effects of specific foods? To isolate the effects of different dietary components, researchers can follow the diets and diseases of large groups of defined individuals over time. Take meat, for example. To see what effect an increase in meat consumption might have on disease rates, researchers studied lapsed vegetarians. People who once ate vegetarian diets but then started to eat meat at least once a week experienced a 146% increase in odds of heart attack, a 152% increase in stroke, a 166% increase in diabetes, and a 231% increase in odds for weight gain. During the 12 years after the transition from vegetarian to omnivore, meat eating was associated with a 3.6 decrease in life expectancy. Once again, I apologize, carnivores. This book is probably not going to make you happy. And I don't advocate for either, because I know that there's benefits of plant and meat-based, but there are statistics that show leaning a little bit towards plant-based seems to help. I don't want to hear everybody tell me that, oh, well, carnivore got rid of this and carnivore got rid of that, because I already know. That's why I don't talk bad about carnivore. Even vegetarians can suffer high rates of chronic disease. There you go, carnivores. Though, if they eat a lot of processed foods. That seems to be the key right there, processed foods. Take India, for example. This country's rates of diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and stroke have increased far faster than might have been expected, given its relatively small increase in per capita meat consumption. This has been blamed on the decreasing whole plant food content of their diet, including a shift from brown rice to white and the substitution of other refined carbohydrates. Packaged snacks and fast food products for India's traditional staples of lentils, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. So we're basically taking a healthy diet and packaging it up and taking all the nutrients out and making it not healthy anymore. Gotta have convenience, right? Yeah. Yay! In general, the dividing line between health-promoting and disease-promoting foods may be less plant versus animal-sourced foods and more whole plant foods versus most everything else. All right, carnivores, you got a little bit of payback there, because that's exactly what he's saying. It's maybe not so much plant versus meat, but it's the processed bullshit we're putting in our bodies. To this end, a dietary quality index was developed that simply reflects the percentage of calories people derive from nutrient-rich foods, unprocessed plant foods, on a scale of 0 to 100. This I need to see. The higher people score, the more body fat they may lose over time. And the lower their risk may be of abdominal obesity. Very good. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, and high triglycerides. Compare the diets of 100 women with breast cancer to 175 healthy women. Researchers concluded that scoring higher on the whole plant food diet index, greater than about 30 compared to less than about 18, may reduce the odds of breast cancer more than 90%. Uh-oh. Sadly, most Americans hardly make it past the score of 10. The standard American diet rates 11 out of 100. According to estimates from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, 32% of our calories come from animal foods, 57% comes from processed plant foods, and only 11% comes from whole grains, beans, fruits, vegetables, and nuts. I'm going to tell you something. I'm in that small percentage because that's mostly what I'm doing. I'm trying to eat a whole lot more fruits, vegetables, nuts, and legumes. So it's possible. You can do it. All right. That means, oh, we already talked about that. Oh, yeah, that means on a scale of 1 to 10, the American diet would rate about a 1. We eat almost as if the future doesn't matter. And indeed, there are actually data to back that up. A study entitled Death Row Nutrition. Look out, Suge Knight. Curious Conclusions of Last Meals. I like that. Analyzed the last meal request of hundreds of individuals executed in the United States during a 5-year period. It turns out that the nutritional content didn't differ much from what Americans normally eat. If we continue to eat as though we're having our last meals, eventually they will be. What percentage of Americans hit all the American Heart Association's simple 7 recommendations? Of 1,933 men and women surveyed, most met 2 or 3, but hardly any managed to meet all 7 simple health components. In fact, just a single individual could boast hitting all 7 recommendations. One person out of nearly 2,000. Hopefully I'm in that small percentage, but we'll see. As a recent past president of the American Heart Association responded, that should give us all pause. The truth is that adhering to just 4 simple, healthy lifestyle factors can have a strong impact on the prevention of chronic diseases. Not smoking, not being obese, getting a half hour of exercise every day, eating healthier. There you go. Defined as consuming more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains and less meat. Those 4 factors alone were found to account for 78% of chronic disease risk. If you start from scratch and manage to tick off all 4, you may be able to wipe out more than 90% of your risk of developing diabetes, more than 80% of your risk of developing heart attacks, cut your risk in half for developing a stroke, and reduce your overall cancer risk by more than 1/3. Wow, that's crazy. For some cancers, like our number 2 killer, we heard that already, colon cancer, up to 71% of cases appear to be preventable through a similar portfolio of simple diet and lifestyle changes. Maybe it's time we stop blaming genetics and focus on more than 70% that is directly under our control. Epigenetics. All right, guys. Let me know what you think. How not to die. Michael Greger, MD.